What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, well, the NFL season is officially over and their offseason officially begins. The Kansas City Chiefs remain NFL champions, Super Bowl champions, back-to-back winners, second time over the San Francisco 49ers. And for those of you who do not remember, Chris Oladokun, Isaiah Buggs, Super Bowl champions yet again. I'm up in Scranton. We all knew following along last week that I was coming up here, 48-hour marathon sprint, some would call it, as my brother's engagement party and then the Super Bowl back in my hometown. It was a phenomenal weekend, but I'm excited to get back to the Berg. How you feeling, my friend?
Feeling good. I'm just glad that I was ready to fall asleep by halftime of that Super Bowl. And then I'm really glad they picked it up I felt like the food coma settling in. Been a long weekend. I was ready to call it a night, but no, they came through and they saved it. That was a halfway decent Super Bowl, I would say.
I agree 100%. It was as slow as it could get, but like it was a Super Bowl where the first quarter, at least, if you had some bets on some things like myself, you were into it enough to be like, all right,
I got to stick things around,
going. Yeah. Second quarter, I agree. I was like, all right, it's getting a little much. I'm focusing too much on the food, a little bit not enough on the football game because it's not catching my attention. Second half, turned it on. And then once you kind of thought that the San Francisco 49ers were going to win, because we were both heavy 49ers in this one. You kind of felt like, okay, this is going to be nice. This is cool. You get emotions start getting a little amped up. Overtime, obviously, but the Chiefs pulled it out. We'll dive into a couple of things here, but you got to start with the second that Patrick Mahomes gets the football on that second drive. Was there any doubt in your mind that this game was not about to end in the Kansas City Chiefs winning the Super Bowl?
It felt inevitable from like the third quarter, Yeah. Like it really felt like, I don't know. It must have like I'm experiencing, I feel like what everyone else did during like the prime Brady years for the first time.
I tried to tell you.
Yeah, it's not very fun. This is not enjoyable from the other side of it. It's really not, because it's just like I said, it feels inevitable. It feels like you are just helpless, like watching him do his thing late in these games, and you're rooting for the other side of it, but nothing seems like it's ever going to stop him.
Exactly. I've been trying to tell you for weeks now. I've been trying to tell you, this is not fun. Nobody is sitting around going, man, this is a good time. I'm very excited to watch the Kansas City Chiefs win again. But I agree. Once they couldn't start scoring touchdowns, once the 49ers were just field goal, I was just like, okay, at this point, if you keep him in the game, he's going to win the game. You can't allow him to do that. That is what Brady did for a long time. It sucked. I really like the Chiefs to, now end that, and we can move on and go to somebody else and hopefully not build another dynasty. I'm cool with new teams every single year. Makes it a lot more exciting. I don't know about you. I lost a lot of money. This was ridiculous. So I was back home in Scranton. Shout out Pops downstairs. He was like, yeah, the one guarantee I'm going to give you, Pacheco over rushing yards. So I made a parlay with the Chiefs winning. It would have saved everything. If everything else was 49ers, if the Chiefs won, that one parlay would have saved the day for me. Everything hit. 5-6 legger, I don't even remember what it was. Everything hit. Pacheco fell 7 yards short of the over. Unbelievable.
It's awesome.
I think I went 0 for 14 last night. 1 for 14. I had McCaffrey scoring the first touchdown. It was terrible. Your thoughts on the Super Bowl show? On the halftime show?
On the halftime show? Oh, I didn't like it at all. No, I was not. And I had high expectations for it. I was really excited for Usher, but I don't know. I was not very impressed. I didn't feel like he really, I don't know. Not that he didn't do anything, but I don't know. It felt very bland. I feel like the guest stars really stole the show. He didn't really do much.
I will say, I very much so enjoyed the halftime show. I'm a big Usher guy, though. My music tastes are weird. We go through this all the time. The Creed commercial, unbelievable. I was, Patrick Stewart throws Hey Arnold into a mountain while Creed plays. I mean, I don't think you could top that. I don't know who's sitting in the room, but I was like, that's genius. I was a big fan of the halftime show, but I will agree with you that, I understand the criticism, because apparently I didn't go on Twitter throughout the Super Bowl. Apparently, Twitter was very your side, not my side. I was in the wrong here.
I didn't know that. That makes me feel good.
Yeah. Apparently, everybody was like, nah, I don't know about that one. Wasn't really great. And I was just in the dark. The guests, 100%, though. Like, you bring out Alicia Keys, always steals a show. Phenomenal. And then Lil Jon, all he's got to do is just show up and, makes everything better. And then to finish it off, I mean, Ludacris was that's just a banger at the end there, especially with the fro. I enjoyed it. So I will say, I'll admit that maybe it wasn't the greatest. Maybe I'm in the wrong on that opinion. But I agree with you. The guests were phenomenal. Super Bowl's over. Offseason officially started. Pittsburgh Steelers officially underway of more changes, personnel changes, whatever. Obviously, already have a bunch of their coaching staff probably moving on to players, and everybody is only talking about one position and one position only, and that is the quarterbacks. And over the weekend, there was plenty of reports about the quarterback and the quarterback that the Steelers hope to keep, who they will go get if they cannot keep him, and maybe a third option with connections to Arthur Smith. We'll start with the first one here, the biggest name when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason. That is Mason Rudolph. According to NFL Network's Ian Rappaport, Mike Garofalo, and Tom Pelissero. Big three, which at that point, you got to just be like, all right, well, that's almost gospel.
The Holy Trinity, yeah. That's
exactly. They say that Mason Rudolph is looking for, quote unquote, a fresh start in free agency. Seems almost as if he's not expected to re-sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers or look to re-sign with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Me and you have kind of laid that groundwork throughout this offseason about, look at all the things that the Steelers have done to Mason Rudolph in the past. I don't know if I'd be looking to re-sign either. Do you think it's, the further along we get, the more reports come out, especially with this one, you kind of feel like it's like should be almost time to start putting it in our heads. Mason Rudolph isn't coming back to the Steelers.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a little surprised that he doesn't really seem to be making the Steelers an option at all. Like, I definitely expected him to explore free agency and do that whole thing and, try to maximize his value like we talked about at other points this offseason. But I thought the Steelers would at least be in the mix. I mean, because they eventually gave him a shot and he really thrived here. I mean, he's had some success in this city. Like, I felt like he would have, at least given that, at least explored that opportunity and that chance and see what the Steelers were willing to give him and what kind of guarantees they could make, what kind of support they could give him. So I'm just a little surprised they're being cut completely out of the process, but I can't say I'm surprised at all that he is more focused on, finding other opportunities elsewhere because, like you said, like, it hasn't always been sunshine and rainbows for Mason Rudolph in Pittsburgh. And as soon as he finally shows them that he's a starting caliber quarterback, it's still, we need some competition. Kenny Pickett's still our guy. Like, this place seems kind of like a dead end for him. So I kind of understand moving on from there.
I agree. I don't think that if I'm Mason Rudolph, the Steelers are my top option, but I agree. I don't think that I'm ruling them out this early because, I mean, I think he ruled them out last year. He sold his house here in Pittsburgh. He was ready to go somewhere else. Nobody called. He had to come back to Pittsburgh. I'm just not. I think it's early to make something as drastic as that. And through a report, maybe his words weren't, I'm not going back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Maybe it was more just like, I'm kind of hoping that I end up elsewhere and the Steelers are still on the table. But still, it kind of feels like the Steelers are his last option. And it is early to kind of be tossing that out there, especially because you don't know what kind of competition you could be looking at elsewhere. Like you may be headed to a team that has a top draft pick, and are you going to go there just so they could draft a Caleb Williams or a Drake May or whoever? And you're sitting around going, all right, well, I'm definitely not the starter here. Like, at least I had an opportunity in Pittsburgh, but I'm definitely not going to be the starter at this team. I do think it's early, but at the same time, like, it doesn't surprise me. They're just like you said, the Steelers have never really given Mason Rudolph a fair shot in Pittsburgh. The fan base up until 4 games ago wasn't a fan of this guy at all. Like, zero respect for Mason Rudolph. The media, the radio, everybody, nothing positive was coming out about Mason Rudolph for a long time, for years. I don't think I'd want to come back here either. I don't think this is where I'd want to, like, become a franchise quarterback. That being said, there's only 32 quarterbacks in the NFL that get to start. So if that's your best opportunity, I'm coming back here with a big smile on my face, ready to go to work. And I think, personally, I think that the Steelers are going to be very skewed towards Kenny Pickett, but only up until the point where Kenny Pickett isn't that good, and they have to realize, all right, look, we have to make a change. Like, this has to be Mason Rudolph. And I think that's a very high possibility that if he does come back to Pittsburgh, if he did come back to Pittsburgh, he ends up the starter like rather easily. And I just think I think all the attention towards Kenny right now is probably pushing him away, but I think it still makes a lot of sense. I still think that if I had to put a bet on it, Mason would beat him out in training camp as the starter, just because I don't see Kenny taking a significant step enough with a new regime to say, hey, this is definitely our guy.
Yeah, I get that, and I think you make a good point about kind of all the attention and all the Kenny's the biggest question of this offseason. Like,
yeah,
Mason, that's kind of his decision, but Kenny is really the Steelers' decision, like how long they want to ride with him. So I understand why everyone's kind of focused on that, and I feel like people had kind of assumed that we were going to lose, that the Steelers were going to lose Mason anyway. They weren't really expecting this guy to be in the mix at all. Going in next year was always, all right, well, who are we filling in for Mitch and or Mason, and I guess Mitch too, because I can't imagine that Mitch is back next season either. But no. Yeah, so you're going to have two open quarterbacks. I think everyone's just kind of operating under the assumption that Mason, excuse me, I keep mixing up those names, that Mason just wasn't going to be part of the picture anyway. So they had kind of moved on. But there's still a chance here. It's just like you said, there's absolutely going to be competition between them. And if I'm Mason, I can imagine a scenario where it's like, well, I've outplayed this guy. Like I have, like once you gave me an opportunity, I already have beaten this guy in a competition. Like there was a time when both Kenny and Mason were healthy and the quarterback situation was up in the air and they continued to roll with Mason. And the idea that he would have to go through, another full offseason and full training camp, I can understand why that would rub me the wrong way. Because there'll be competition elsewhere, but it's you don't know what that competition is. You know what the competition is here, and Mason has put up better results in that competition.
I agree. I think you could look at the Super Bowl last night and the Brock Purdy situation and say he wasn't competing with anybody. You know what I mean? Like San Francisco wasn't like, oh, well, we're gonna give Trey Lance the starting job, and then we're gonna see if Brock Purdy is better. They said Brock Purdy's our best quarterback. He obviously wins us games. He's our guy. To the point where they traded Trey Lance, the guy that they drafted third and moved up to go get. They're like, nah, we don't want any distractions. This is Brock Purdy's job. The Steelers are handling it the total opposite way. They're like, well, Kenny gets every opportunity until we run out of resources, and then Kenny no longer gets those opportunities. Instead of just looking at it like, who's our best quarterback? If Mason Rudolph by a mile, let's make him the starting quarterback. I agree. I agree with the whole picture. I agree with Mason's side of it. I don't agree with the Steelers side of it. I think that they're handling it, I don't know, not even like they should. I think that if Kenny had flashes of like, oh, Kenny's like really good, and there were moments where you were like, oh, this is, Kenny's really good, but he just lost the job because of injury, I could see handling it the way that they are. But the fact that, Kenny was injured, he got healthy, they stuck with Mason because they clearly saw that Mason was their best option and that he produced results that they've been looking for 2 years. To just be like, oh, okay, we're going to go back to Kenny and then, we'll see what happens. I don't think that they've handled it the right way. And I think that plays a role into Mason sitting around saying, I don't know if I want to go back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And I can't say I disagree with them. Guys, we have gear, new merchandise from AST to Muth, Bleed Black and Gold, Kenny to George, and plenty of others now at our new website, blackandgoldapparel.com. And the coolest part, 50% of all profits at our store go to UPMC Children's Hospital here in Pittsburgh to make sure that we are giving back. We can't thank you guys enough, and we want to show you guys how thankful and how grateful we are for everything by making sure that we do our part to make the community here in Pittsburgh better. Go check out everything. We tried to make everything new and improved, from our designs to our quality of sweatshirts and t-shirts and everything else. Let us know and check everything out at blackandgoldapparel.com. And as always, thank you guys for everything. On the other side of that report, there is one name that has popped up that has continued to pop up. We've talked about him as well. Ryan Tannehill, the NFL Network Insiders, they call themselves, which badass name, if I trio of it, just what are we? We're the Insiders. That's like superhero. Have said that they expect, or the expectation is, the Steelers will pursue Ryan Tannehill in free agency, try to put their hands on or get their hands on the guy that Arthur Smith once took to a Pro Bowl and an AFC Championship game and won Comeback Player of the Year with, so on and so forth. Tannehill's 33, 34 years old, something like that. At this point, he's no longer a starter in the NFL. Is it becoming more realistic? I mean, we just talked about, is it hitting a point where you have to accept Mason Rudolph is not going to be with the Pittsburgh Steelers? Are we also starting to hit a point where you kind of have to start putting in your head that Ryan Tannehill is going to be with the Pittsburgh Steelers and this is going to be their guy that they rock behind Kenny Pickett? Because there's no way Ryan Tannehill is coming into Pittsburgh and competing for a starting job, right?
I don't know about that. I mean, so
Yeah.
I'll start with, I don't think they should bring in Ryan Tannehill. To me, that feels like, I don't know, you're counting on Arthur Smith to revive this guy's career for a second time when he's older and arguably in a worse situation. Like, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it doesn't seem ideal to me. It seems like it's thinking small, and it feels like you're just seeing something that worked in the past and not kind of thinking about something that might work in the future. It's just kind of leaning on past results. But I think that being said, if they do bring Ryan Tannehill to Pittsburgh, I think it's very, very clearly to compete for a starting job. Like, I don't think Ryan Tannehill comes in here as a guaranteed backup. Because
Okay.
that's unless they, do something crazy and like draft a quarterback at 20th overall or something or draft a first round quarterback. Because I think they need someone who's going to actually push Kenny as competition for a starter. And if that's not Ryan Tannehill, who are you? Like, I just don't. I think Ryan Tannehill is the type of quarterback that you would only bring in if you think he has the potential to be a starter.
Yeah.
So I think if you're looking for a backup, you could get, I don't know, probably someone better and probably someone cheaper. Like, why would you not go with like a Jacoby Brissett or I can't even think of other names, but like I feel like there are better options as far as a backup goes.
I agree. I don't think Ryan Tannehill should come in here at all, but if he is coming in here, I think it's crazy to say, and I'm not going to disagree with him coming in here and competing for a starting job, but I think it's absolutely nuts to have your sights set on Kenny Pickett and Ryan Tannehill as your potential starting quarterback in 2020. Like, that is
definitely,
how low is your bar? Like, where did what went wrong there? I think that's just absurd to wrap your head around. But if that's what they're thinking, that's nuts. What is like a real competition? What's, you know what I mean? Ryan Tannehill comes in here. We looking at like a Mason Rudolph in 2023 or 2022 competing with Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett? Like, is it that type of competition, or do you think it's like a real, like, they're going to give Ryan an actual shot here to be the starting quarterback?
I think I don't really know how to quantify that, because I think he'll get a shot. Like, he'll take he would take some first team reps in training camp, I feel like. But I mean, to your point, like, I feel like they would figure out pretty quickly that Ryan Tannehill is not a starting caliber quarterback. But I just don't think they would bring him in with the intention of, oh, you're just going to sit on the bench for the entire, I don't know. I get what Ryan Tannehill is right now, but I think if you're doing this reunion with Arthur Smith again, it's to try to maximize what you can get out of Ryan Tannehill, and he doesn't. That doesn't strike me as a move that they would make just to keep him on the bench as a backup.
Do you think Ryan Tannehill, even if he does revive himself, even if he's coming back here and he's, there's no way he's what he was the first time he was with Arthur Smith. There's just, years have gone by. You're not the same player that you were. Sorry, Joe Flacco's awesome and it was a cool year, but that doesn't happen most times. Like, where are you going? Like, in your head, what's the ceiling of Ryan Tannehill is the starting quarterback of the Pittsburgh Steelers? first off, is it higher or lower than what it is with Kenny Pickett? And like, are they even close to a Super Bowl team? Like, I feel like that's where you're shooting with this. Like, like I agree. I
Yeah,
don't think
yeah,
that
it
they're
definitely
anywhere near.
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't raise their ceiling, I think, at all. I think it would be, it's something they would do, I think, to kind of get to that point where you have a good enough quarterback, Like I think in
Yeah.
their mind it makes them competitive enough with the top half of or it could make them competitive with the top half of the AFC. I don't really see that, but it's certainly not an upgrade. Like I don't think it makes them, I don't know, it's not the kind of move where you make it and then you automatically, move up a bunch of spots and into a different category of AFC contender or
Yeah.
like league contender, quite honestly. So yeah, and I think to that point, like it's not a move I would make. Like, and I think
No.
if you are adding a new quarterback, it's either got to be someone really young or it's got to be an automatic ceiling raiser. And Ryan Tannehill is neither of those things.
All right, so let me ask you this. You said it's got to be somebody real young or it's got to be a ceiling raiser. The other name that the insiders have mentioned is Desmond Ridder being on the trade block from the Falcons. They're reportedly in the mix for Justin Fields. I think it's like if the Steelers end up with Desmond Ridder and Justin Fields goes to the Falcons, what went wrong? How did that happen? Like who sat in a meeting and said, I don't think we should go get Justin Fields. But you want to know who we should trade for? Desmond Ridder. That's the guy that we should go get. That's a whole other story. That's a whole other topic of conversation. Desmond Ridder on the trade block, possibly, obviously linked to Arthur Smith and the Pittsburgh Steelers, even though he was back and forth, benched, not benched. You got to remember there is a three-game stretch Daniel Flick mentioned to us where he was second best quarterback in football behind the one and only Super Bowl champion Patrick Mahomes. I mean, as you hear that name, what are your thoughts when you hear the name? I don't even have a question. What are your thoughts when you hear Desmond Ridder, Pittsburgh Steelers?
Just kind of why are we thinking so small? Like, why are we only looking at quarterbacks that Arthur Smith has worked with before, Like, I get it. Like, these are just rumor, like, these are reports, who knows how serious the interest is and everything. But, like, if these are our big names, Ryan Tannehill and Desmond Ridder, I don't understand that because there are other quarterbacks out there. There are guys who haven't worked with Arthur Smith before. There are guys who have had results in other systems, and it just feels like small thinking. It feels like we're just not aiming very high at all. If we're looking at Desmond Ridder and I just don't know what Desmond Ridder is. Like there's no and this is kind of the same conversation as Tannehill, but like, is he a starter in the NFL? Like, do you really think that he is a starter in the NFL? And if he is a starter, is he raising the ceiling for the Steelers at all? That's what I feel like this offseason is to be about. Is not like this team is good enough. We're not just looking for competitive though. We're not looking for good enough. We're looking to take that next step. We're looking for another leap, and I don't see how either Desmond Ridder or Ryan Tannehill help you take a leap at all.
No, there's just no. How do you go from what? Where is the thought process? What is the train of thought to go? You want to know who isn't good enough to just guarantee himself a starting spot on this roster? The number one quarterback in the draft class 2-3 years ago. You want to know who might be good enough to become the starter for the Pittsburgh Steelers? The number 4 or 5 quarterback in the draft class 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Like, I just don't. I can't wrap my brain around how they consider. Art Rooney sat in front of me, and my brain is going a million miles an hour because this is just bonkers to me. Art Rooney sat in a table where I sat as well, and the first thing out of this guy's mouth was the quote unquote next step for the Pittsburgh Steelers is quote unquote quality quarterback play, that they need to go get quality quarterback play, and that has to be their top priority this offseason, and that they have to figure out the quarterback situation. And then when he talked about Kenny Pickett, all he could describe is the good things are the intangibles, the bad things are the tangibles. The bad things are the how you play quarterback, the good things are the how you talk about leading a team as a quarterback, which, cool, maybe you can teach those things. But to set your bar as we need to go find another quarterback. We have to go find quality play because we saw what we can get out of these things. And then to say, all right, well, that bar is possibly 34-year-old Ryan Tannehill, who is no longer a starter in the NFL, and Desmond Ridder, who may have never been starter capable in the NFL, to come in here and compete with Kenny Pickett, who at the end of the season was not starter capable because of Mason Rudolph. It's just, I like their first approach. Like, I like their go get Mason Rudolph. He's our top option. I have no issues with that. You know, if that's a guy that you guys feel confident in, and if the Pittsburgh Steelers see as this guy has more left in the tank that we think we could get out of him, awesome. If that does not work out and you have nothing behind him besides a bunch of guys that you clearly know are not going to beat out Kenny Pickett, or you look at and just say, well, maybe he could beat out Kenny Pickett, but I don't know how high that ceiling is. It just doesn't make any sense to me to just, it's almost as if they're giving up, you know, like it's like, all right, Mason didn't work out. What's the easiest options? You know, how could we just get somebody, like, you might as well go get Malik Willis and just say, hey, maybe he's going to work out too. You know, who cares?
Right. Just rebuild the entire 2017, 2018 Titans. What year was
No, he wouldn't. Malik was he wouldn't have been there that year. He's in Kenny's draft class.
Oh, right. He was much later.
That, 2020, 2021?
2022, I think, was technically the draft. Yeah.
So he's sitting there like, you might as well just go get every quarterback that you had interest in and say, well, you know, one of these guys is going to work out. You know, who it is, who knows, but we'll figure it out.
Right. And it didn't seem like they have a guy, you know, and you felt like, I don't know, they don't know what they really want out of this quarterback position, quite honestly. Like, I think they want Kenny to work out, but I don't think they know what their plan. Like you said, they seem to have a backup plan. Like, they don't seem to know what they would do if Kenny doesn't work out, which is a little concerning. And it's just, there are only going to be fewer and fewer quarterbacks available. There are only going to be fewer and fewer options as time goes on. And I just worry about what kind of direction what plan they have and what direction because like I said, it just doesn't seem like they even really know what kind of player they're looking for.
No, it feels like they're putting in their list of priorities, making sure Kenny Pickett works out seems to be above being a Super Bowl contender. And that's not going to work out in the long run, because if it works out and Kenny Pickett's the guy, cool. Then everybody looks like an idiot and you look like geniuses. Cool. Sounds good. If it doesn't, you're sitting right back to where you were, possibly in a worse spot because you don't have a quality backup instead of somehow finding what Mason Rudolph was at the end of the season. And I think Kenny Pickett wins games. Like, I think Kenny Pickett leads you to a winning record. Like, I think that's what Kenny Pickett brings, and I think that's what the Steelers are capable of getting out of him. But it shouldn't be like, if that's not your bar, you know. And I think that's where people were hoping it changed this offseason, and it's not. And if they switch those two, if they said, well, we want to win a Super Bowl and priority 2 is making sure Kenny Pickett works out, you'd bring in tougher competition and you just hope for the best, and you wouldn't be worried about taking a risk that maybe lowers the chances of Kenny Pickett being that guy. And I think that's where things go awry, and that's what's going to lower the whole expectation of the season, is where they are right now.
Right. And like, this is a team that has made the playoffs for 2 of the last 3 years, right? But they've just barely snuck. Like, you need to aim higher at some point. Like, at some point it's got to be, and these are like tough calls. Like, this is where roster building gets really hard. Like, I think building a team into something that can be really competitive and like a playoff contender is one thing, but getting them over that hump and getting them progressively up each next level, that's where it gets real. I mean, look at the 49ers. Like, the 49ers have built what looks like on paper like a nearly perfect roster. Like, I don't know where the holes on the 49er roster is, and they still, lose in the Super Bowl, like every time they make it there. It's hard to do this stuff, but you have to make hard decisions in order to get to those points and put yourself over the hump.
Exactly. And the Steelers are, we say it all the time, like, if the Steelers had this quarterback, think about how much farther they would have been this year. Like, they're a team that on paper have a lot of really, really, really good players. And they have some holes, obviously, but they should be much better than where they stand and where they finish year after year. And that's just where they are. If you had to guess before we head out of here, if you had to guess right now, currently, and we're going to ask this question a dozen times throughout the offseason, but it's the day after the Super Bowl. It's a good time to ask it. Your prediction right now, if you had to guess, who's the Steelers starting quarterback in week 1 of the 2024 season?
Kenny Pickett. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. I would say it's Kenny Pickett. Who's their backup? Who's your prediction if it was their backup?
It's a good question. That is a really good question. I'll have to update myself on honestly, I think they're going to end up drafting a quarterback, quite honestly, in like the third or fourth round. So I think whoever, I don't know who the third and fourth round quarterbacks are this year, but someone in there.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think my prediction as a backup right now, starter's Kenny. I predict Kenny Pickett. Backup, I think I'm going to go Ryan Tannehill. And yeah, I know a lot of people are going to shake their heads at that too. Yeah, I don't feel super hot about it, but that's my prediction. The day after the Super Bowl, shout out Chris Oldokun, man. I hope he's doing well in Kansas City. Shout out Isaiah Bugs. I hope he's doing well in Kansas City. With that said, we're heading out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast. We are really trying to push that audio download and those reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. So make sure you check us out and subscribe there as well. Find all our work at allsteelers.com and our pit coverage at InsideThePanthers.com. We will be back on Wednesday. I don't know. It's cold and about to snow here in Scranton, so I hope it's a good day in the Berg. Enjoy it. Peace.